My name's Tom Ross, and welcome to the Honest Entrepreneur Show, where I bring you tried and tested advice to help your online business without any of the bullshit. Welcome back, and today I am super excited to talk about what I think is the most important thing in marketing. Actually, scrap that. I think it's the most important thing in marketing that people aren't doing enough, and that is actually getting people to care about what you're putting out. I think there is a huge amount of misinformation out there and people focusing on the wrong things. And today I want to dig into exactly what those things are and just look at how I think marketing should be done in the right way. To take you there, let me take you back a few years to young Tom, right? So young Tom was making his way in the world of marketing. And I remember when I started learning this stuff, I invariably did what so many of us do. I turned to sites like Google, I turned to sites like YouTube, and I started searching, how do I do internet marketing? And you can probably guess what came up, right? Tons of bad information, like the cheap ebooks and the email list that started funneling me loads of information and trying to upsell me products and all that kind of sleazy stuff. And whilst it didn't sit very comfortably, I remember just kind of buying into it to an extent because I thought, well, these guys are doing well and they must be talking some level of sense, even if I don't like the way they're putting out their information. You can probably guess the stuff they were pushing as common sense. It was all about how to get more traffic, how to get more leads, how to get more followers, all of these kind of very metric-based points. What I started to realize is these guys were effectively reducing their customers and their community members to numbers. And I think that is incredibly common in the online marketing world. I think everyone's obsessed with just the bad practice of trying to reduce people to numbers and get them through a funnel and then see them as a conversion rate that spits out something at the other side. I think it strips out the humanity in what we do, and it's not how people tend to behave in real life bricks and mortar businesses. You don't own a shop and wait for people to come in and be like, that's customer number 597 and they have a 4% conversion rate at the bread stand, and from there I'm going to upsell them this. Like, I think the faceless nature of the internet can bring out some bad practices, but it can also bring around some tremendously positive opportunities and correct ways of doing things. Invariably, when I had been consuming a lot of this bad advice, I landed on what I thought was the right blueprint. And so I thought, okay, traffic. That's what a lot of these marketers are talking about. So I better learn how to get traffic. And I did. I set out, I researched, and I set my mind to it. And so I ended up launching my Photoshop blog, PSD Fan, and within 3 months, I was getting 100,000 visitors a month. And pretty soon I was getting 250,000 visitors a month. And I thought, wow, I've cracked this marketing thing. This is awesome. And I remember telling my friends, it felt great. Like, I've got this big blog and it's getting all this traffic. And it was a real kind of ego boost at the time. But really, the whole thing felt very, very hollow because so few of those people actually cared. I hadn't built a real business. I built more of a part-time income. I couldn't turn it into the thing I wanted it to be. And the whole thing just felt a little bit weak compared to what I'd been sold. The dream of having millions of visitors and how that was going to make you a rock star. It didn't really play out how I expected. So I'm sure some of you listening to this are thinking, oh wow, millions of visitors to my blog. That sounds pretty great, right? That's a real aspiration in today's modern world. And I want this episode to be kind of disruptive to what is preached about this stuff. I really want you to try and forget about those vanity metrics as they're known. The metrics and the data which only really serves to massage your ego. All the strategies which I was using were great for attracting traffic, but not engaged traffic. So, for example, I was getting a bunch of traffic from sites like StumbleUpon, which, if you're familiar with it, it's like flicking a TV remote. People are just surfing through. You've got an average of about a second on your site per view. It's pretty much meaningless. Compare that to an engaged visitor who spends an hour on your site browsing around every page and subscribing. The difference is monumental. But for me, chasing traffic, I thought, great, I got 17,000 visits today from StumbleUpon. I must be doing something right. All these different sources were a result of my high level thinking of traffic is king, everything else is secondary. And that's a really depressing place to be in, because when you actually dig below the surface, you realize there's not much going on at all. And the proof is in the pudding, right? I might have had, some ad sales, I might have had some members signing up, but for the scale of the audience, the engagement and the revenue was relatively pretty tiny relative to some smaller audiences that are incredibly engaged and lucrative and have awesome communities. There's simply no comparison. I think it should hopefully be freeing that you can have a small audience. You can have an audience of 100 people and turn that into a part-time business. People don't need to think so big. There's so much that you can do with a loyal, engaged, small community that you build up over time. The point is, it's not about how many people read your blog or follow you on Instagram. It's about how many of them actually engage and care and build a relationship with you and buy into your brand and an ambassador for what you're putting out and tell their friends and all of that stuff that comes with an actual depth of interaction. That for me is the greatest side of marketing. That's the most rewarding side. And ironically, it helps you build the biggest business. Yet it's what 99% of marketers out there aren't teaching. Most marketers are teaching the funnel system or the secret formula or how to get rich or how to extract value from a pool of people. And in my opinion, all of that stuff sucks. I think when you really get down to the heart of it, nothing is more important than actually getting people to care. To give you a few more examples of this beyond just my blog, I see it play out time and time again. You look at some of these social media influencers, and then you look at the actual data behind this. What percentage of them have actually bought their followers? How many of them actually have spammy looking comments or no comments at all, but they might have 2 million followers? The whole thing is a charade. It's a race to the top in terms of followers, but in the process, it's a race to the bottom in terms of real engagement. We've worked with partners through my company where there's been people with an audience of 300, 400, 500,000, and they've been crushed in terms of performance by someone with an audience of 5,000. That is how little the numbers matter. And it's been staggering to me until I started seeing this play out in real business. When you see it map out that an audience outperforms a bigger audience by 100 times as a ratio, that's when it starts to sink in. And that's what I've done with my business at Design Cuts. We are technically David, right? There's some Goliaths out there, and with David, we're relatively small, even though we're at a decent capacity now. But being David can be fun. Remember, David wins, right? Being David is great because it's smaller, right? It's more agile. People care more about David. David's the hero. People support David. You don't want to be Goliath. I feel like everyone's chasing Goliath and they need a fundamental mindset shift because David is where it's at when it comes to marketing. I feel like if you're trying to be Goliath, it leads to some pretty shitty behavior. That's when you start to use your audience instead of serving them well. That's when you start to reduce people to numbers. That's when you neglect the audience you have to go after the audience you don't. And this is something I preach in a lot of my content. If you've got 1,000 followers, don't worry so much about the next 1,000 you're going to attract. Focus on the 1,000 that you have. I think a great example of this is phone companies, right? They suck you in with compelling offers and they treat you like their best friend. And then when you're on the contract, they forget about you because they're focused on their next 1,000 customers. And soon your prices are going up, the service has dropped down, and they're romancing the next set of customers. And that leaves you feeling pretty crap about yourself, right? Yet that's what so many of us are doing. We're so focused on growing our follower count that we actually forget to provide real value and give a shit about the followers we already have. If you saw my previous episode on how to successfully launch an online business, I talked about focusing on getting the first customer, the first 10 customers, not worrying about 10 steps down the line and your 10,000th customer. The same thing should really go for any content you put out, any interactions with your audience, any marketing in general. Think in the here and now. Don't always be looking over the hill to the next milestone. It's great to have ambition, but really, I think we need to just chill for a second and realize that we don't always need to be 10 times bigger, 100 times bigger, chasing the next 1,000 followers. We need to just take a moment and actually address the people who care about us right now, today. In next week's episode, I'm really keen to break down systematically some of the best ways to actually build that engagement, because that is my mission right now. I'm having a lot of fun around my personal brand and everything I'm doing here. I might not be selling anything, but this is like my digital playground to actually build a highly engaged, awesome community where I'm making some really solid relationships and having fun in the process. And let me tell you, it is a million times better than running the big site, with the million visitors who just don't care about you. I've legitimately had friends and acquaintances talk to me about potentially buying followers on Instagram because they are so obsessed with like keeping up with the Joneses, and they've got more followers than I do, and my followers don't look professional enough, and when I hit 10,000 followers, that's going to be the inflection point when everything grows. And I think as a society we need to snap out of this mindset that more followers is the answer, because you'll get there and the only thing that will happen is you'll have the same terrible engagement, but you'll feel even worse because it should be higher with the bigger audience, but it's not. All that's going to happen is you've got this hollow, empty audience, and you go, oh, well, now I've got 10,000 followers and I'm still getting no comments, so I must really suck. It's bad on every front. I highly recommend, if you're listening to this, forget the vanity metrics, forget 99% of what's being preached, and tune in next week, because I really want to start digging into how to build a real community, how to get real engagement. It's the most rewarding, positive way to run a business. It's a really effective way to grow a business, as well as just act like a decent person, where you're not reducing other human beings to data and numbers, because that for me is not marketing. Marketing is about humans helping humans. I hope this episode went down as intended. I want to really kind of dismiss a lot of what is out there about this stuff. I want this to be a wake-up call. I want it to be the wake-up call which I wish I'd heard years ago, when I was deep in this misinformation and I couldn't see the wood for the trees, and I was just all about followers and traffic, and it was leading me down some bad paths. This is the message that I personally wish I'd had back then. So if you feel like this is resonating with you and you're making some bad decisions and focused on the wrong things, please do try to focus more on the engagement, more on the people, more on the community, because I guarantee it is far more rewarding and far more effective. Thanks so much for tuning in as always. I appreciate you guys so much. You are awesome. This is a perfect example of a great community in the very early stages. So I appreciate you being here, and I'll see you next time. Hey, thanks so much for watching this episode. Really appreciate you being here with me. If you haven't yet, please do subscribe right here on YouTube. Remember, tick the little bell icon so that you get proper notifications. I really hope you're enjoying the show. I hope you'll stick around for the upcoming episodes. I really want to keep bringing you as much value as possible. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you guys soon.